The chandelier light scattered across crystal glasses and polished silverware, turning the private dining room of Valmont Royale into a cathedral of wealth. Every table was occupied by people who moved the world quietly: bankers, CEOs, political donors, heirs whose last names opened doors before they even knocked. And at the center table, seated perfectly upright in a dove-gray tailored suit, was Eleanor Whitmore, billionaire, philanthropist, industry legend. A woman whose presence alone could make conversations soften and spines straighten. At 74, she had outlived rivals, buried friends, and built an empire that touched medicine, technology, and global finance. Newspapers called her the Iron Matriarch. Boardrooms knew her as ice in human form. She did not raise her voice. She did not show emotion. She did not break. Until her eyes fell on the necklace. Nia adjusted the weight of her tray on her left palm and moved carefully between the tables, as she had been trained. Small steps, straight back, eyes lowered but alert. She had worked at Valmont Royale for 8 months, long enough to know which guests wanted conversation and which wanted invisibility. The woman at the center table was firmly the second type. Everyone knew Eleanor Whitmore. Everyone knew you did not interrupt her meals, her thoughts, or her silence. Nia approached anyway, rehearsing the wine specials in her mind, her nerves steady from repetition. She wore the standard black uniform, hair pulled back, no jewelry except for the one thing she never removed: a thin silver chain resting against her brown skin, holding a small oval pendant. She didn't notice the moment Eleanor's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Eleanor's eyes had narrowed, not in irritation but in shock. Her gaze had locked onto the glint at Nia's throat as if something impossible had just surfaced from the dead. The room continued around her, cutlery clinking, a soft violin somewhere beyond the walls, a low hum of powerful voices, but Eleanor heard none of it. The world had telescoped down to a single object, no bigger than a coin, swinging gently as the young waitress walked. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Her fingers, usually so controlled, tightened around her napkin. Her breath caught, sharp and uninvited, lodging painfully in her chest. Nia stopped at the table. "Good evening, may I offer you?" "Where did you get that?" The question cut through the air, brittle and trembling. Nia blinked. Guests weren't supposed to speak like that, not to staff, not here. She steadied her tray. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Eleanor stood. Chairs scraped softly behind her as nearby diners shifted. Eleanor Whitmore almost never stood during meals. Assistants stood. Investors stood. Government stood. Eleanor remained seated. But now she was on her feet, staring, one hand pressed flat against the table as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. "That necklace," she whispered, "where did you get it?" Nia's first instinct was fear. Not the loud kind, the quiet one that lived in service workers, the fear of having done something wrong without knowing what, of being one misunderstanding away from losing everything. Her grip tightened. I've had it a long time. Is there a problem?" Eleanor took one unsteady step forward. The dining room was going silent. "I need you to tell me," Eleanor said. Her voice was no longer iron, it was fractured glass. "Please." Robert, the floor manager, appeared at once, tension in every line of his body. "Mrs. Whitmore, I sincerely apologize if there's been—" "Not now," Eleanor said without looking at him. The words were soft. They were absolute. Robert froze. Eleanor lifted a trembling hand, hovering inches from Nia's chest, not touching, not daring to. "That pendant," she said. "Turn it." Nia hesitated, then gently pinched the chain and rotated the small oval. On its back was a faint engraving, worn thin by time. Eleanor inhaled sharply. Her knees buckled. Several guests gasped as the most powerful woman in the room swayed, and Nia instinctively moved forward, abandoning every rule of protocol, setting her tray down and reaching out to steady her. Eleanor's hand caught her wrist with surprising strength. "It's real," Eleanor whispered. "Oh God, it's real." Tears spilled over. Actual tears. They slid down Eleanor Whitmore's face, streaking makeup, collapsing a public image that had stood untouched for decades. A ripple of disbelief passed through the room. Phones lifted before being hurriedly lowered. No one spoke. No one dared. Nia's heart hammered. "Ma'am, I don't understand. This necklace was given to me when I was a baby. It's all I have from before foster care." Eleanor's breath hitched violently. "Foster care?" "Yes," Nia said quietly. "I was found in a hospital in Newark. No name, no family, just this." Eleanor made a sound that did not belong in a place like Valmont Royale. It was not elegant. It was not composed. It was grief, raw and animal and long contained. 27 years ago, she had lost a child. Not to death. To silence. To disappearance. To a night that had never ended. Her fingers finally touched the pendant. And when they did, Eleanor Whitmore collapsed against the young black waitress, clutching her as if she were holding something that could vanish if she loosened her grip. "I found you," she sobbed. "After all this time, I found you." Nia stood frozen, arms half raised, the billionaire grandmother crying against her shoulder, the most powerful room in Manhattan staring as a mystery began to crack open. She had come to work expecting to carry plates. She had not known she was wearing a history. She had not known she was carrying someone's lost world around her neck. And she had no idea that before this night was over, everything she believed about her past and her future was about to be rewritten. The past that refused to stay buried. The private office behind Valmont Royale's dining hall felt smaller than it should have, as if decades of wealth and control had suddenly shrunk under the weight of one fragile truth. Eleanor Whitmore sat on the velvet settee, her posture no longer regal, her hands wrapped tightly around a porcelain teacup she had not touched. Across from her, Nia perched on the edge of a chair, unsure where to place her hands, unsure where to place herself in this new and terrifying reality. Robert lingered near the door, visibly shaken, while a discreet security team sealed the room from the murmuring crowd outside. Word had already begun to ripple through the restaurant. Something extraordinary had happened, something no one could yet explain. Eleanor stared at the necklace as though it might speak. "I paid a jeweler in Milan to design that pendant," she said quietly. "There were only two made, one for me, one for my granddaughter." Her voice cracked on the final word. "Inside it there should be a compartment." Nia's fingers trembled as she gently pressed the edge. The oval opened with a soft click. Inside was a tiny folded slip of yellowed paper. Nia had never opened it. She'd always been afraid to. Eleanor reached out, hesitated, then carefully removed it and unfolded the brittle square. A name, a date, and a hospital wing number. Eleanor covered her mouth as a sound escaped her that was almost a wail. "This was placed in her blanket the night she disappeared," she whispered. "I wrote it myself. I begged whoever found her to take her to Mercy Wing, to call me." Her eyes lifted to Nia, red and shining. They never did. Nia felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I was found in a bathroom," she said slowly. "A nurse heard me crying. There was no note in my file, no family listed, just abandoned." Eleanor closed her eyes. The memory surged without mercy. 27 years earlier, a charity gala, a sudden call, her infant granddaughter missing from the nursery of a private hospital suite. Doors sealed, police summoned, the media devouring every whisper. Then weeks, months, years, a child swallowed by the machinery of a city. Eleanor had funded searches, task forces, international databases. She had hired men who claimed to find the unfindable. Nothing. Eventually, the world moved on. Eleanor never had. "I thought she was dead," Eleanor said. "I buried a child-sized coffin filled with nothing. I stood over an empty grave and told myself grief was all that remained." She met Nia's eyes. "But you lived." Nia's chest burned. "I didn't have a grandmother," she said. "I had intake forms, group homes, lockers, nights where nobody knew my name." She swallowed. This necklace was the only thing that stayed. When people were cruel, when places were worse, I used to hold it and imagine someone had loved me once. Alina broke then completely, not the public tears. These were private, violent. She reached across the small table and took Nia's hands, pressing them to her face. "You were stolen," she said, "and you were strong enough to survive it." Robert quietly excused himself, closing the door behind him, leaving two worlds alone together. They spoke for over an hour. Alina told her about the Whitmore family, about her son who had died young, about the granddaughter who had been her second chance at joy. Nia told her about foster sisters who vanished overnight, about learning to become small, about working 2 jobs while finishing community college, about dreaming of nursing school. The billionaire and the waitress. The matriarch and the girl. Each sentence stitched something together that had been ripped apart before memory could fully form. Outside, phones vibrated. Security whispered. Someone had recognized Nia from the dining room. Someone had recognized Alina's collapse. The world was beginning to press in. Alina finally straightened. Something in her face hardened, not into ice but into resolve. "Whoever took you," she said, "did not just hurt my family, they broke a system. They turned a child into a file number." Her voice steadied. "I will find out how." Nia felt a chill. For the first time, the power behind Alina Whitmore did not feel distant. It felt like a storm gathering behind her. Because this reunion was not the end of a mystery. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The woman who tried to erase a child. By morning, the story was already changing. Headlines didn't know what to call it yet. Some spoke of a mysterious collapse, others of a lost heir. But inside Alina Whitmore's penthouse, the truth was being rebuilt from fragments. Lawyers sat quietly against marble walls. A private investigator Alina had trusted for 20 years spread yellowed files across a glass table. And beside the window, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, Nia watched the city that had raised her without ever knowing who she was. The investigator, Samuel Cross, spoke carefully. "Your granddaughter's case was officially closed in 2004, he said, but several documents were altered. Intake reports, transfer logs. Someone inside Mercy Wing changed them." He slid a page forward. A nurse's signature sat at the bottom. Her name was Lorraine Huxley. She resigned 2 weeks after the disappearance. Alina's jaw tightened. She was vetted, background checks, psychological screening. Cross nodded. And yet she was the last person recorded entering the nursery before the child vanished. Nia's hands curled in her lap. "So she took me." "Or helped someone else do it," Cross replied. Another file opened. A photograph. A pale woman with tired eyes and a tight smile. "Lorraine Huxley didn't disappear," Cross continued. "She changed her name, moved to Pennsylvania, married, had a daughter." Nia leaned forward. "She now manages a chain of assisted living facilities." Alina's gaze sharpened. "Facilities funded by whom?" Cross hesitated. "Lancaster Philanthropies," he said. Alina exhaled slowly, a sound like distant thunder. "She has been taking my money for 20 years. The room fell silent. The betrayal was layered now. Not only had a child been stolen, but the thief had lived comfortably under Alina's protection, funded by the very woman she had devastated. Nia felt a sickness she couldn't name. "Why?" she asked. "Why take me?" Cross placed one final document down. It was a deposition transcript from decades ago. "Lorraine lost a baby 3 months before your disappearance. Hospital records confirm it. Stillborn. She suffered a breakdown. There are notes about obsession, about attachment to infants." "She replaced her loss with mine," Alina said. Cross nodded. "And to do that she had to erase you." Nia's breath stuttered. "I wasn't abandoned," she whispered. "I was stolen." The words rearranged her entire life. Every foster transfer, every unanswered birthday, every social worker's shrug. They were not accidents, they were consequences. Alina moved to her then, slow but unwavering, and placed a hand over Nia's. "You were loved," she said. "Before you ever remember, you were loved." Nia's eyes burned. "Then why didn't love find me?" Alina had no answer that could heal that. But she had power. And for the first time, she intended to use it not to build but to confront. Within hours, Alina's legal team had secured sealed warrants. Cross's network had located Lorraine Huxley's primary residence and 3 facilities under her control. Financial analysts were already tracing donation pipelines, identifying how much of Alina's philanthropic wealth had unknowingly supported the woman who took her granddaughter. "You don't have to come," Alina told Nia quietly. Nia stood. "Yes, I do." Alina searched her face, not the face of a waitress, not the face of a child, but the face of someone who had survived being erased. Then Alina nodded. They would go together. Because some truths could not be delivered by lawyers. Some needed to be seen. And some confrontations were not about punishment. They were about reclaiming a life. When the past finally knocked back, the assisted living facility in Lancaster County sat on a gentle hill, its white columns and manicured hedges projecting comfort, order, and quiet respectability. It was the kind of place families chose when they wanted to believe their loved ones were safe. Lorraine Huxley had built her reputation here: community awards, local interviews, smiling photographs cutting ribbons beside grateful families. She was known as a woman who dedicated her life to care. She never expected the black sedan. She never expected Alina Whitmore. And she never expected the young black woman standing beside her. Lorraine was in her office reviewing quarterly donations when the front desk called. "Ms. Huxley, there's a Mrs. Whitmore here to see you." Lorraine's pen slipped from her fingers. Moments later, Alina entered the lobby without announcement. She didn't rush. She didn't glare. She walked the way people do when they no longer need permission. Nia followed, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Lorraine emerged from her office wearing practiced warmth. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is an honor. I wish I'd known you were coming." Alina did not take her hand. "Do you recognize her?" Alina asked, nodding toward Nia. Lorraine's eyes moved to Nia's face. For half a second, something ancient flickered there. Then the mask returned. "I'm afraid I don't." Alina reached into her purse and removed a small velvet pouch. She opened it. The silver pendant lay inside, catching the overhead lights. Lorraine staggered back. Color fled her face. "That," Alina said quietly, "was last seen in a nursery at Mercy Wing Hospital in 1999. Lorraine's mouth opened, closed. "I don't know what you're implying." Nia stepped forward. "You're implying you don't remember," she said, "but my life remembers for you." Lorraine's composure cracked. "This is absurd. I've devoted my life to children, to families." "Yes," Alina replied. "You devoted my money to doing that." The word struck. Security had sealed the lobby. Cross and 2 attorneys stood near the doors. Lorraine's world was shrinking. Alina placed a folder on the reception desk. "Your resignation, the altered records, the sealed donation trails, and the hospital psychologist's notes describing your fixation after your stillbirth." Lorraine trembled. "You don't understand. I was broken. I had lost everything." "And so," Nia said softly, "you took me." The sentence landed like a verdict. Lorraine's knees buckled. She sank into a chair, hands covering her face. "She was there," she whispered. "No one was watching. She was crying. And when I held her, she stopped." Her shoulders shook. "I told myself I was saving her. I told myself you wouldn't miss one child among your millions." Alina closed her eyes. 27 years of searching crystallized into one unbearable truth. "You did not save her," Alina said. "You sentenced her." Lorraine looked up at Nia. "I tried to find you later," she whispered. "I went back, but you were gone." Because systems swallowed me, Nia replied, and you walked away. Sirens approached in the distance. Families in the lobby stared. Phones rose again, this time not stopped. Cross spoke quietly into a device. Warrants were being executed. Financial accounts frozen. Authorities arriving. Lorraine sobbed openly now. I'm sorry, she said to Nia. I'm so sorry. Nia studied her. Then she spoke the words she had waited her whole life to understand. I survived you. Alina stepped beside her and placed a hand on her back. Outside, doors opened, and the woman who had erased a child was finally being written into the light. When the world finally learned her name. By the time Alina and Nia returned to New York, the story had already escaped them. News vans crowded sidewalks. Social feeds pulsed with speculation. The image of Lorraine Huxley being escorted from her own facility in tears had spread overnight, stripped of context but heavy with implication. A missing child, a billionaire, a waitress, a necklace. The pieces were being arranged by strangers before Nia herself fully understood how public her life was about to become. Alina's legal team moved quickly, issuing a statement that was precise and restrained. There would be no theatrics, no press conference yet, but there would be facts: a confirmed abduction, altered medical records, a private search that had never stopped, and a young woman who had lived unknowingly inside the margins of that loss. Nia woke the next morning to a phone vibrating nonstop. Her name, her real name, had been released. Alina Whitmore. Given to her at birth. Stolen with her. For a long time, she simply sat on the edge of the guest bed in Alina's apartment, staring at the skyline, whispering it aloud as if it might dissolve. Alina Whitmore. It felt borrowed, heavy, unfamiliar. And yet, something inside her recognized it the way the body recognizes its own reflection. At Valmont Royale, the consequences were immediate. The manager who had rushed to remove Nia from Alina's table that night released a public apology. The restaurant placed her on paid leave, citing concerns for her safety. Online, the conversation turned. Clips from diners who had filmed the moment Alina broke down surfaced everywhere. Comment sections filled with anger, shame, and confession. Former service workers wrote of being invisible. Others admitted how quickly they judged the girl with the tray, without knowing the history she wore around her neck. But none of it compared to what came in the mail. Letters. Hundreds of them. From foster siblings who thought they recognized her. From nurses who remembered Mercy Wing. From strangers who had once lost children and never stopped searching. Each envelope carried a story that pressed against Nia's chest, reminding her how many lives were quietly shaped by absence. Alina watched her read them from across the room, her eyes reflecting both pride and a grief that had changed form but not weight. You don't owe the world anything, Alina said gently one evening. You don't owe them interviews, or gratitude, or forgiveness. Nia folded a letter carefully. I know, she said, but I owe myself something. She lifted her gaze. I want to go back. To the restaurant, Alina asked. To the place where everyone thought I was small, Nia replied. I don't want my story to only belong to boardrooms and headlines. Alina studied her, then nodded. The next evening, Valmont Royale's dining room fell into the same hush it had days earlier. But this time, it was not confusion that silenced it. It was recognition. Nia walked in wearing the same black uniform, same pulled-back hair, same necklace. But she did not walk alone. Alina Whitmore entered beside her. Together. Whispers followed them, phones lifted, guests stood. Nia did not look at them. She looked at the tables she had served. The places where her hands had trembled. The chairs that had never known her name. And when she stepped into the center of the room, Alina spoke. This young woman, she said clearly, was invisible to many of you, not because she was unimportant, but because we are trained not to look. Nia felt Alina's hand squeeze hers. "You will look now," Alina continued, "not because of who she is to me, but because of who she has always been." Nia took a breath, and for the first time in her life, she let the world see her. The inheritance that could never be stolen. The world wanted spectacle. They wanted interviews, statements, appearances on stages framed by microphones and sympathy. They wanted Nia, Alina Whitmore, to cry for cameras, to forgive on cue, to represent something larger than herself. But in the days that followed her return to Valmont Royale, she chose something quieter. She chose mornings. She chose tea on Alina's terrace as the city woke. She chose walking beside the woman who had searched for her longer than she had lived without her. They talked about small things, about how Alina hated the sound of clocks, about how Nia used to name the cracks in foster home ceilings to feel less alone, about the way some losses don't vanish, they simply move inside you and learn how to breathe. The trial of Lorraine Huxley proceeded without drama. The evidence was too complete, the paper trails too precise. She pleaded guilty to abduction, falsification of medical records, and financial fraud. Her sentence was long enough that she would never again manage another life but her own. No speech from the bench could restore childhoods. But when the gavel fell, Nia felt something loosen in her chest. Not joy. Relief. Because the lie that shaped her life had finally been named. Alina established the Alina Initiative 3 weeks later, an independent fund devoted to missing children from marginalized communities, to hospital accountability, to foster system reform. But when reporters praised her generosity, Alina corrected them. "This was not created from guilt," she said. "It was created from recognition." She placed a hand over Nia's. "Power," she added, "means nothing if it never learns who it has been ignoring." Nia did not become a socialite. She did not leave nursing school. She did not step away from the world that had shaped her. Instead, she stepped into it differently. She finished her semester. She volunteered at the very hospital she once feared. She spoke to foster children, not about riches, but about worth, about surviving being unseen, about how identity does not begin where someone tried to erase you. On the anniversary of the night at Valmont Royale, the restaurant closed its private dining room. Not for donors. For a long table of foster teens. Alina funded the evening. Nia hosted it. She walked between them with plates, laughing, listening, sitting when someone needed to speak. And when dessert arrived, Alina stood. "Some of you," she said, "have been taught that power sits only in certain chairs. That dignity comes from certain clothes. That importance announces itself." She gestured gently to Nia. "I met my granddaughter while she was serving a table." Silence settled, warm and attentive. "And in that moment," Alina continued, "she was already everything I had spent my life building." Nia felt her throat close. Alina turned to her, "Not because of blood," she said, "but because of the way she learned to stand." Nia reached up and unclasped the necklace. The silver chain slipped free. She placed it into Alina's hand. "I carried this to remember," she said. "I don't need it to belong anymore." Alina closed her fingers around it, then gently returned it. "You don't carry it now," she replied. "You inherit it." Nia fastened it back around her neck. "Not as proof. As history." And when the evening ended, and the young guests left full and laughing, Nia stood alone for a moment in the empty room that had changed her life. She was still a waitress, still a student, still a woman learning her name. But she was no longer invisible. She had never been small, and she would never again be mistaken for it.